Let us sanctify knowledge. Education and knowledge are good things, but if they are not sanctified, they will be wasted things that lead to disaster. A group of university students arrived at my Kelly one day, loaded with books. They said, "Geronda, we are here to discuss the Old Testament with you. God permits knowledge, doesn't he?" "What kind of knowledge do you mean?" I asked them. "Knowledge acquired with the mind." "Yes," they answered. "This kind of knowledge," I replied, "will take you up to the moon, but will not lead you to God. It is good to have a good brain and go to the moon and spend billions of dollars in fuel expenses and so on. But it is far better to have the spiritual powers that raise man to God, his ultimate destination, with only a bit of fuel, a mere dried piece of bread." Once I asked an American who visited me at the Calvary, "What has this great nation of yours accomplished?" "We went to the moon," he replied. "How far is that?" I continued. "Oh, perhaps 500,000 kilometers away," he replied. "How many millions of dollars did you spend to get there?" "Since 1950, he said, we have spent rivers of dollars." "Did you get to God? How far is he?" "God," he said, "is very far." "Well," I replied, "it only takes us a dry piece of bread to get to him." Natural knowledge will help us acquire spiritual knowledge, but when we do not go beyond the level of natural knowledge, we are confined to nature and cannot reach heaven. In other words, we remain in an earthly paradise watered by the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. We enjoy the beauty of nature together with all animals, but we do not ascend to the heavenly paradise to rejoice with the angels and the saints. In order to reach the heavenly paradise, we need to have faith in the landlord of paradise in order to love him. We need to realize how sinful we are and be humbled. In this way we will come to know him, to converse with him in prayer, and praise him not only for his help, but also for our many trials and tribulations. Geronda, does a person who finds peace in prostrations, fasting, asceticism, and so on, still need to study dogma and theology? A basic education is actually a very helpful tool, but we should not seek knowledge in order to help or impress others with clever remarks. We should get an education in order to help ourselves. If we make the effort to sanctify the gifts given to us by God, the light of grace will come and enlighten our minds. It is there, in the experience of the mysteries of God, that we will discover all the dogma and theology. There are still among us people who are simple and pious, who do not wish to learn more. They are content with whatever God has given them. Why is that even though we have become nuns, we still desire secular knowledge? This means that we lack true knowledge, and you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. When we become humble and are enlightened by God, our minds become sanctified and our logic is strengthened. Before the mind is sanctified, its energy is carnal. If out of egoism an uneducated person tries to interpret the dogma and reads the Apocalypse, patristics, and other works, he'll become confused and end up losing his faith. God's grace will abandon him because he acted out of egoism. You see, humility helps in everything we do. It provides us with the strength that we need to persevere. I can think of the wisest things, the smartest solutions to a problem, but if my thoughts contain egoism, they will be sheer nonsense. By contrast, humility will always bring wisdom. This is why we must struggle with philorimo and much humility. Otherwise, instead of doing us good, our efforts will bring the opposite result. A confused mind, overwhelmed and led by the ego, will not be able to help itself and will end up saying blasphemous things. Even a well-educated person runs the risk of being harmed when attempting to interpret the dogmas of the church. Imagine what happens when an uneducated person tries to penetrate into the patristic spirit without first having reached the spiritual state. If he had had even a little spiritual state, he would not have tried this on his own. He would have said to himself, "If I should need to understand something, God will send His light. In the meantime, I will put into practice what I already understand. That should keep me busy." In other words, Gironda, lack of humility and lack of devotion lead people to misinterpret the gospel. That's right. When humility is missing, the interpretations we are likely to give are the product of logical reasoning alone. They lack divine enlightenment. When we do not understand something, should we leave it for later? Yes, we must say, "It says something good here, but I do not understand it." This is exactly what I did. When I was reading the gospel as a young man and did not understand something, I did not try to interpret it. I would say to myself, "It says something good here, but I do not understand it." Later I found that when an interpretation was needed, it would come to me instantly. Sometimes I would then say to myself, "Let me ask someone else how this should be interpreted," and it would turn out to be exactly the way I had understood it. It is great impudence for someone to try to interpret the gospel, especially if he does not understand it. This is why when you study, you should avoid interpreting what you do not understand. Instead, try to cultivate good thoughts until divine illumination brings you discernment. Things will then become clear on their own, with no effort from you. Can we understand something at a deeper level when we have a better spiritual state? I would not say at a deeper level. A single divine truth has many meanings. Some may be understood now and some later. A person may study for years and learn a lot, and yet not be able to grasp the meaning of the gospel. By contrast, someone who does not study much, but has humility and an ascetic fighting spirit, can come to a true understanding because his mind is illumined by God. Sometimes our desire to study more is caused by vainglory or pleasure. We are like a person who is watching wrestling on television and is constantly checking his watch to make sure that he has enough time to watch as many matches as possible. You see, he likes watching the game but has no interest in learning anything about it. This kind of person is nothing more than a superficial spectator. He will never become a real wrestler. Geronda. People often call the educated person a cultivated person. Is this always true? When we say that someone is a cultivated person, we mean that he is a person who is cultivated spiritually, a spiritually mature person. I have noticed that among uneducated people, there are some who are very proud and others who are very humble. It's the same among the educated. Some are very proud and others are very humble. In other words, what makes the difference is how cultivated one is in spiritual terms, how cultivated our inner self is. This is why Saint Basil the Great says, "The most important thing is to hold a high position and have a humble disposition." A person who has reached an important position in life may be justified to feel a bit proud about it, but someone who does not have a high position but is proud has no excuse. What really matters is that we cultivate our inner self, that we have cultivated souls. If in addition to that we are also educated and have a humble disposition, then that is the best of all worlds. But not to be highly educated and yet to think highly of ourselves, well, that's inexcusable.